Good morning. You are now listening to Morning Sign-In, where we will talk about the latest in health-related research. The song you just heard is Indie Guitar Opener by Flores, spelled Florews.
As a disclaimer before we start, the Morning Sign-In show is not run by healthcare professionals. As a result, we ask that you do not use the information provided as medical advice. The content on Morning Sign-In is meant to be educational and entertaining, and some of it comes from research which reports conclusions rather than gives professional opinions. If you are in a life-threatening healthcare emergency, please contact 911. Thank you, and please enjoy the show.
Hello, this is DJ Lee.
DJ Dree.
And DJ Tay, signing in.
Being our first episode, we wanted to discuss a little bit about the organization behind our show, Morning Sign In, which is Morning Sign Out, or MSO.
Morning Sign-Out is a nationwide organization seeking to improve health literacy. The three of us are officers in the UCLA chapter, which involves a crew of editors and writers that create articles on our website. The website is mso@ucla.org or msoatucla.org. If you're interested in the organization, don't hesitate to reach out. We would love to hear from you.
For today, we plan on discussing individual articles written by each one of us, and then we'll showcase some podcast content from our website to give you an idea of what we have in store. Over the next few weeks, we'll be having a conversation about health-related topics. Without further ado, welcome to Morning Sign-In, Episode 1.
Hello everyone, how are you doing? This is DJ Tay, and I will be discussing a topic using one of the articles I've written in the past for MSO. That topic involves COVID-19 and then strokes. I'll go over each separately. By the way, the background music that you will hear in my section and in DJ Dree's section is called Podcast Jazz Music by Dennis Pavlov Music. To start off, all of us here are familiar with the impacts of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which causes the COVID-19 disease. For most of 2021, it kept us quarantined in our homes. The world saw a, unprecedented shutdown as an abrupt outbreak of a virus occurred, causing over 760 million cases and 6.9 million worldwide deaths since December 2019, according to the WHO, or World Health Organization. A lot of us saw declining mental health during the pandemic, according to sources like the National Institutes of Health. And, at least in my case, felt like momentarily life was thrown off track. Oh, and for some of us UCLA students out there, I'm sure you remember the sudden shutdown during winter 2022. There was this 4-week period after winter break where we had online classes again, after all of them happened the previous academic year. I am also sure many of us are familiar with the expected symptoms of the COVID-19 disease, but I will rehash. It has some signs of a common cold, such as fever, chills, or sore throat. Less commonly though, there are muscle aches, severe fatigue, even shortness of breath, which has been used as an example of one of the COVID-19 disease's calling cards, even prompting folks to use pulse oximeters. And these pulse oximeters, they're basically devices that clip onto the finger and are used to measure oxygen levels in the blood. By the way, it has been shown that those with COVID-19 do tend to have low oxygen levels, but recommendations are mixed with regard to use of an oximeter. So, now we have an overview of COVID-19, but what about strokes? And what do they have to do with COVID-19? As explained by Mayo Clinic, a stroke occurs when the blood supply to part of the brain is blocked or reduced. So common symptoms include the following: trouble speaking, understanding what others are saying, numbness, weakness, or paralysis, problem seeing, headache, and trouble walking. So essentially, this has to do a lot with the coordination and motion of the body. Going more specifically though, there are two main types of strokes, and excuse the medical jargon, I'll digest it in a bit. Ischemic and hemorrhagic. Ischemic strokes are the most common, and these happen with reduced blood flow from blockage. Hemorrhagic strokes, on the other hand, occur when a blood vessel in the brain leaks or even ruptures. This originates from the term hemorrhage, which is when there is a massive perfusion or leakage of blood from a vessel. Now to the essential part. How are COVID-19 and strokes related? Well, you may have heard the term long COVID. As you may infer from its name, Long COVID involves a wide range of ongoing health problems even after folks have recovered from the initial COVID-19 illness. The range of health problems can include fatigue that interferes with daily functioning, symptoms that worsen after physical or mental effort, difficulty breathing that remains after the illness, difficulty thinking or concentrating, which is called brain fog. Really, the list goes on. But a common theme is that there's not really one. Symptoms can be hard to explain and manage without clear markers from clinical tests and misunderstanding from medical providers. It's just known that folks, especially those who have experienced severe COVID-19, can have these long-lasting symptoms, and they may be more likely to develop new health conditions compared to those who have not had COVID-19. So, in the scientific quest for answers, researchers have really been scrambling to publish answers and share results with the rest of the community. In just 6 months after the majority of closures in March, it was estimated that 23,634 unique published articles have been indexed in 2 major scientific databases alone, Web of Science and Scopus, related to COVID-19. Let me say that again. Over 23,000 articles on a topic that had not really been a focus just a year prior. When I was a newly recruited writer for Morning Sign Out in 2021, I was caught up in this answer-driven craze as well. The atmosphere never felt better than that time to write on something COVID-19 related. And with rising concerns about long COVID, why not write on something involving long-term symptoms? In my search, I stumbled upon newly published research out of the University of Udine about COVID-19 and stroke. Apparently, some scientists in Italy were also caught up in this answer-driven craze as well. And for your reference, the research paper is titled Stroke in Patients with COVID-19, Clinical and Neuroimaging Characteristics. Along with other related research, what they found was a new discovery in the field of neurology. These investigators found that stroke was a complication of COVID-19, affecting approximately 1 to 3% of hospitalized patients and up to 6% of those in the ICU or intensive care unit. What's interesting is that there was also observed to be a 7.6-fold increase in the odds of cerebrovascular complications with SARS-CoV-2 infection as compared to just influenza. And what's more is that patients develop symptoms of COVID-19 infection, including respiratory symptoms and fever, before the onset of stroke, which appeared only 10 days later, so this is called delayed presentation. This delayed presentation is consistent with the lingering effects and vulnerabilities of long COVID patients. Regarding the types of strokes experienced, ischemic strokes were the most common among the COVID-19 patients observed. Acute ischemic strokes, or sudden attacks involving blockage of vessels delivering oxygen to the brain, represented the most common presentation among the COVID-19 patients in the study. Hemorrhagic strokes, or strokes involving vessel leakages or ruptures, were less common, occurring in 0.5% to 0.9% of COVID-19 patients. Well, at this point, you may be wondering about the outcome of the patients who had COVID-19 and suffered stroke. We know that it has been a disease with a not-so-middling case fatality rate. This CFR basically is the number of deaths from a disease divided by the number of diagnosed cases of the disease, of course multiplied by 100 to represent a percentage. It is around 10% for those who contract COVID-19 versus 0.1 to 0.2% for seasonal flu in the United States. Although case fatality rate was not given in the report from Italy, it does state that functional outcomes of patients were unfavorable in more than 70% of cases, and in other groups, high mortality was detected. This means that if even patients survived the effects of COVID-19, they were left with unfavorable brain-related function, which can be demonstrated by limitations in mobility, vision, and speech. What's the cause of these outcomes and the incidence of stroke in these patients? Well, the researchers had a suggested answer for that as well. The investigators proposed that the distinct structure of the SARS-CoV-2 virus may be at fault. The virus has a set of spike proteins on its surface, hence the name of the disease, coronavirus. Corona means crown in Latin, since it was originally observed to have projections resembling those of the points on a crown. Anyhow, these spike proteins allow the virus to enter cells by binding to them, and it has been hypothesized that binding of these spikes to an important protein actually reduces the body's protective mechanisms against increasing blood pressure. Increasing blood pressure, or hypertension, has been implicated as a common cause of strokes, considering that it can damage vessels in the body and eventually lead to the rupture. One other proposed cause included proteins called cytokines that the body releases from the immune system that cause inflammation, which may provide conditions for weakened vessel walls and the eventual rupture of the arteries, which are major blood vessels that distribute blood away from the heart and that undergo extreme pressure when the heart beats. The researchers end off with this typical scientific cliffhanger, stating that more research is ultimately needed to effectively investigate details of what they have seen or investigated in the study. Even more recent research in 2023 from the European Stroke Journal substantiates the previously discussed study, going on to report that after COVID-19 recovery, subjects had twofold increased risk of ischemic stroke. More so, Mayo Clinic states that, quote, some early research shows that COVID-19 infection may increase the risk of ischemic stroke, but more study is needed, end quote. Mysterious, huh? After writing my article on this research, I personally felt that one of the great merits of the scientific community, not just the health sciences community, is the communication of knowledge. It's an ever-expanding and ever-changing field that thrives with open access and transparency. That's why I'll be bringing you more, along with DJ Dree and DJ Lee, in future weeks. Thank you for listening, and I hope you stay tuned for the following discussion. Here's some chill beats. The song is called Lo-Fi Chill, parentheses medium version, by B.O.D. Leasons, spelled B-O-D-L-E-A-S-O-N-S. Enjoy!
That was Lo-Fi Chill, medium version by B.O.D. Leasons, spelled B-O-D-L-E-A-S-O-N-S. Thank you so much, DJ Tay, for that captivating discussion on COVID and stroke risk. For anyone that just tuned in, welcome to Morning Sign-In, a student-run radio show where we bring you the latest news from the world of medicine in an easy-to-understand way, no matter your science background. This is DJ Dree here, and right now we'll be exploring a study about the effects of exercise on managing symptoms of Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome, or PCOS. Now, I know what you're thinking. I just threw a whole bunch of really complicated words at you, but never fear, we're gonna break this down together. We'll begin our discussion with an overview of the endocrine and reproductive systems and how PCOS affects them. After that, we'll talk about the exercise study itself and break down some of its key takeaways. The first thing you need to know is PCOS is a disorder that affects the body's endocrine system. The endocrine system is made up of a collection of organs called glands. And these glands are like mini factories within us that all share one important job: to make and to release hormones at the right level and the right time. Now, you might have heard of hormones before in your daily life. They're those pesky culprits behind mood swings or hunger, but did you know that they're responsible for much more? Hormones are messenger signals that order and organize many different parts of the body to do their job at the right time. When their balance is thrown off, the internal clocks of many bodily functions are too. For example, in a person with PCOS, one of these hormones, called androgen, is overproduced. Such a high level of this hormone causes issues in any process usually regulated by androgen, including ovulation, which is the monthly release of eggs by the female reproductive system. Now, before we discuss PCOS and ovulation any further, let's pause to understand what the reproductive system actually is. This system is responsible for creating the two components needed to create future humans: sperm in males and eggs in females. For now, we'll focus on one of the key components of the female reproductive system, the ovaries, since they're the organs that are predominantly affected by PCOS. The ovaries are an important part of fertility, or the ability to have children, because they're the place where eggs initially form and develop. For a person with a normally functioning reproductive system, these eggs travel from the ovaries to another organ, called the uterus, every month during a process known as ovulation. And what makes sure this release happens every month like clockwork? Our handy-dandy friend androgen, which is the hormone that's affected by PCOS. If you change the levels of androgen, you'll change the schedule of ovulation too. And this explains why one of the most notable symptoms of PCOS is missing or having irregular menstrual cycles. A menstrual cycle, more commonly known as a period, occurs when the female reproductive system sheds the lining of the uterus, which, if you remember, is where the egg ends up after it's released by the ovaries during ovulation. This regular shedding causes bleeding and other symptoms for anywhere between 3 to 7 days. And just like ovulation repeats every month, a menstrual cycle usually repeats every 21 to 28 days. And this is a consistent schedule that just repeats every single month. However, in an individual with PCOS, the body cannot regulate menstrual cycles the way it should because of its super high androgen levels. And this causes extremely long and unpredictable cycles as a result. And that may come every 35 or more days. Now, PCOS is surprisingly more common than you'd think. On a personal level, I was initially drawn towards learning more about this topic after my friend was diagnosed with PCOS a couple of years back. And according to the U.S. Department of Health's Office on Women's Health, this condition actually affects 1 out of every 10 women of childbearing age. That's 1 in 10 women between the ages of approximately 15 to 49 years old, as defined by the World Health Organization. That's a lot of people. Of course, it's also important to note that the condition affects not just women, but any individual with ovaries, regardless of their gender identification. Additionally, a study published by the Endocrine Society in 2021 has even shown that there may be a male equivalent to PCOS, suggesting there's much more to discover about this condition with future research. Of course, that brings us to today's research topic. As we mentioned earlier, today's discussion is a research study from the journal European Review for Medical and Pharmacological Sciences, which was published in 2022. This project aimed to see if and how implementing consistent exercise affects the symptoms of PCOS patients. One way to measure for the presence of PCOS in an individual is by tracking how much chronic inflammation a person has. This is because chronic inflammation, which is basically the long-term overactivity of the body's defense mechanism, the immune system, has been shown to cause the ovaries to produce too much androgen over time. So basically, too much inflammation will cause the ovaries to produce a lot of androgen. And remember, those high androgen levels are what cause PCOS, as far as we can tell. Now, as explored by the researchers, lowering these inflammation levels may be a key to helping treat the disorder, because if you can lower the inflammation levels, maybe that'll help to, bring the production of androgen back to its regular levels, and that will help to, relieve all those symptoms that are caused by high androgen levels that cause PCOS. So, throughout the study, a group of 40 PCOS patients who were aged 25 to 35 participated in an aerobic exercise regimen to see how it affected their inflammation levels. Now, aerobic exercise in general refers to any exercise that increases your heart rate. The word aerobic actually means requiring oxygen. So an aerobic exercise will usually make you breathe faster or harder than normal to bring oxygen from the air into your body in order to produce energy. Examples of aerobic exercise include biking, swimming, jump rope, and perhaps most commonly, running. In this study in particular, half of the participants attended hour-long treadmill sessions 3 times a week for 12 weeks, while the other half acted as the control group, or what would happen if, we did nothing special in particular. And so they didn't do any additional exercise outside of their normal daily activity. At the end of the study, researchers compared the exercise group to the control group, and they found that the group that exercised had significantly lower levels of inflammation compared to the control group. This suggests that for individuals with PCOS, exercising regularly may help to lower chronic inflammation, and as a result, it could help curb the overproduction of androgen by the ovaries. By lowering androgen production, this may help restore a regular hormonal balance, and as a result, it can help lessen PCOS symptoms. It is important to note that although exercise has been shown to help the management of PCOS, this approach may not completely solve the situation for everyone. Everybody is different, and other factors such as family history of the disorder also play a role in its development. And that's why visiting a gynecologist, which is a doctor that specializes in the health of the female reproductive system, is an important first step. Some patients might need medication or other procedures to treat the disease effectively. Nevertheless, lifestyle changes such as adding more physical activity to the daily routine, eating a balanced diet, and reducing stress have a bounty of health benefits in addition to alleviating inflammation for individuals with PCOS. Thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned in a couple minutes for our next discussion with DJ Lee. For now, you're listening to The Weekend by Chillmore, spelled CHILLMORE. Enjoy!
That was The Weekend by Chillmore, spelled Chillmore. Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm DJ Lee, and you're listening to Morning Sign-In, where we make scientific research accessible and easy to understand. Thank you, DJ Dree, for telling us more about polycystic ovarian syndrome. In this next section, I'll be talking about a topic that some people might already be familiar with: eczema. First of all, what is eczema? According to the National Eczema Association, eczema is a non-contagious inflammatory skin condition that affects 31.6 million people in the US. It has 7 different types, one being atopic dermatitis, which is the most common form of eczema. I was first drawn to this topic because many of those around me actually have eczema. That got me wondering, what exactly is happening that causes the dry, red patches of skin for those with eczema? Before we answer this question, though, we have to know what a skin barrier is. Dr. Pilling, from an article by the Cleveland Clinic, states that the skin barrier is the outermost layer of our skin, called the stratum corneum. It's non-living and consists of components such as lipids, fats, and dead cells. The Cleveland Clinic says that if our skin cells make up our skin barrier, the lipids in our skin function to, quote-unquote, fill the gaps between the cells. The National Eczema Association says that with a weakened skin barrier, the skin is unable to retain moisture and can contribute to eczema symptoms of dry, red patches of skin on the hands, wrists, face, and other parts of the body. These patches can also be itchy, flaky, and even form blisters. It's been found that eczema can start from a very young age or even from adulthood. Then where does eczema come from? The Cleveland Clinic states that one reason could be due to the immune system overreacting to irritants in our environment, which then induces the inflammation that we see with eczema. Another reason could be that interactions between our genes and environment trigger eczema. For example, those with a family history of eczema or conditions like asthma or hay fever may be more likely to develop eczema. Genetic mutations that weaken our skin barrier could also increase the likelihood of eczema development. Things like smoke, soaps, heat, humidity, and other things that we come into contact with could induce or worsen eczema symptoms. Even stress affects our skin and could worsen eczema symptoms. One particular study published in the journal Tissue Barriers by Lipsky et al. At Bingham University wanted to find whether there was a relationship between amounts of skin lipids or natural oils on the skin that protect the skin and numbers of the bacteria Staphylococcus aureus or S. aureus on the skin. By visualizing S. aureus on artificial stratum corneum samples, the researchers were able to compare S. aureus's ability to pass through the skin barrier with either normal levels of lipids or decreased levels of lipids. The researchers found that a greater number of S. aureus was able to penetrate deeper into the stratum corneum for samples with decreased lipid levels. But it's important to note that these results showed no statistically significant difference. In other words, the results were not definitive enough for the researchers to conclude that there was a correlation between low skin lipid levels and S. aureus permeability. The researchers did say that their experiment had some limitations. First, the experiment used stratum corneum samples that were continuously submerged in liquid during the experiment, which isn't very representative of real-life conditions. In addition, other bacteria compete with S. aureus in natural conditions, and so the researchers stated that future experiments should take these other common skin bacteria into account. The researchers added that understanding the role of specific proteins in protecting our skin barrier from bacteria would be important as well. Next, we'll be talking about the do's and don'ts of eczema. Although the exact causes of eczema are still unanswered, there are definitely some things that those with eczema are advised to do and not do. And remember that this podcast is in no way giving medical advice, as we aren't medical professionals. Always make sure to consult your doctor for any condition. Let's start with the don'ts. For don'ts, the Mayo Clinic states that those with eczema should avoid prolonged water exposure and hot water on the skin. There's also something called the itch-scratch cycle, which describes how inflammation makes the affected area itchy, and if the area is scratched to relieve the itch, it causes more inflammation, and then the cycle continues. According to the National Eczema Association, this itch-scratch cycle itself is very complex. Keratinocytes, the main cell type of the skin, is said to release signals that activate skin nerve fibers when the skin barrier is damaged. These skin nerve fibers then send messages to the brain which initiate the itchy feeling. When the area is scratched, the reward centers that are activated essentially begin the itch-scratch cycle. That's why it's so important for those with eczema to avoid scratching the affected area. Then, what are the do's? The Mayo Clinic states that those with eczema should care for their skin by moisturizing frequently and using gentle soaps. Especially with COVID-19, frequent hand washing means more opportunities for drying the skin, so moisturizing is really important here. The National Eczema Association also says that those with eczema flare-ups, a return or worsening of eczema symptoms, can temporarily treat their skin with medications such as topical creams and oral medications. One study by Chu et al. In the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology actually did a meta-analysis to evaluate which skin treatments were the most effective in treating atopic dermatitis. Harvard Health Letter's executive editor Heidi Godman summarizes the results for us. In this study, more than 43,000 participants averaging 18 years old were given treatments of 5 different categories that are said to be commonly used in the medical field to treat eczema. The researchers found that the most effective medications included pimecrolimus and tacrolimus, which both fall into the calcineurin inhibitor treatment type, as well as some moderately strong topical corticosteroids. The most ineffective were found to be topical antibiotics. Once again, Morning Sign-In is not providing medical advice, as we aren't medical professionals. We simply want to make scientific research more accessible, but you should always consult a medical professional for any conditions. And that concludes this week's podcast. Thanks for tuning in with us, Morning Sign-In, where we provide the latest scientific research and make research more accessible and easy to understand. If you're curious about our work, make sure to check out our website at www.mso@ucla.org. Here, you'll find all of our past and recently published articles by our members, brief translations of some of these articles, our podcasts on other platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, and much, much more. Also, make sure to check out our Instagram at mso.ucla to stay updated. The music you're listening to right now is Once in Paris by Pump Up the Mind, spelled Pumpupthemind. What you listened to was Once in Paris by Pump Up the Mind, spelled PUMPUPTHEMIND. Next up, in this week's episode of Morning Sign-In, we'll be sharing one of our highly loved podcast episodes to give you a sneak peek into some of our work in the past. I'm DJ Lee, and in this particular episode from our Spotify podcast, I host a discussion with MSO writers Kritika Dama and Andrew Camacho to talk about how online grocery shopping may be key to better nutrition habits. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Andrew, and thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to delve into this topic, so let's jump right into it. As many of us know, nutrition and a good diet is so important for our bodies in order to promote physical and mental wellness. Sometimes it can be hard to know what's actually good for our bodies, especially with so many nutritional fads and detrimental diets surfacing on the internet. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, it is recommended to add lots of whole fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and a variety of protein into the diet because they provide your body with other nutritional benefits. For example, fruits and vegetables can be rich in vitamins, which are really good for your immune system, and fiber, which is good at regulating sugar in your body. It's generally known that adequate amounts of these food types are good for you, but it can be hard to keep track sometimes for a variety of reasons, such as cultural differences in diet. However, while promoting healthy foods is a great way to encourage healthy eating, there's a lot of value in understanding why certain foods and diets may not necessarily be good for your body. Over time, an unhealthy diet from the consumption of certain foods can manifest into detrimental physical effects on your body. A Harvard article highlighted that the overconsumption of things like added sugars, processed foods, and high salts are the types of foods that you should enjoy in moderation and be conscious about. The reason for this is that poor nutrition can often lead to heart disease, diabetes, and obesity, amongst other things. However, another common result of an unhealthy diet is high blood pressure or hypertension. Hypertension is a common condition in the United States. In fact, the CDC reported that 47% of individuals live with hypertension and that only about 1/4 of those with hypertension have their condition under control. Hypertension is when the blood in the arteries consistently pushes against the arterial walls at elevated rates. Blood pressure is also expressed as a ratio. The number on top refers to the systolic blood pressure, and the number on the bottom refers to the diastolic blood pressure. The systolic pressure is how much pressure the arteries experience when the heart beats or contracts. The diastolic number is how much pressure the arteries experience when the heart rests between beats. The normal blood pressure range is when systolic pressure is less than 120 millimeters of mercury, and diastolic pressure is less than 80 millimeters of mercury. Stage 1 hypertension is denoted when the systolic number is between 130 and 140 over the diastolic number of 80 to 90 millimeters of mercury. Hypertension is associated with various problems. The CDC states that because of the pressure on the arteries may lose their elasticity, causing less blood flow to the heart. In effect, blood flow and blood oxygenation decreases. This means that the heart has to work a lot harder in order to pump blood throughout your circulatory system. This can cause the muscle of your heart to thicken, and the strain could eventually lead to heart failure. Hypertension can lead to other large health complications, including kidney disease and stroke. Researchers have made great efforts to address this problem, and that's where today's article comes in. Kritika, can you introduce us to this study?
Thank you for the introduction, Andrew, of course. The research study, Efficacy of Supermarket and Web-Based Interventions for Improving Dietary Quality, a randomized and controlled trial, was conducted by Steen et al., and the study was published in Nature Medicine. The purpose of this study was to study different dietary approaches that could be used in order to reduce one's risk of hypertension. Researchers paired with grocery stores and specifically studied how online shopping could be adapted to encourage better nutrition habits. It specifically used a program called SuperWin, which essentially tested two types of interventions. The first intervention mainly focused on providing participants with an in-person education on nutrition led by dietitians. The second intervention also had participants receive the same type of in-person dietitian-led education, but also provided them with online resources, including online shopping, home delivery, and other technologies that make grocery purchases easier. The guidelines provided by dietitians in each intervention emphasize the DASH diet by showing participants ways that certain ingredients and meals can be used to fulfill the DASH guidelines.
Wait, what's the DASH diet?
Yeah, so the DASH diet, also known as the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, is a diet plan that focuses on reducing risks for hypertension by eating foods that are rich in potassium, calcium, magnesium, and cutting down on sodium. The diet also encourages a diet rich in vegetables, fruits, and whole grains as well. The DASH diet is one of the main baselines that many nutritionists use when developing healthy dietary standards. In general, both interventions studied decreased hypertension risk factors and increased the likelihood that people adhered to healthier diets 6 months after the study. However, the group of people that were exposed to the extra online technologies decreased their risk of hypertension much more than the group that did not have access to those technologies.
But how do these researchers know that the risk of hypertension decreased among participants?
Great question. So, researchers were able to measure the hypertension risk of participants by using one of the most standard strategies known as the DASH score. First, participants receive a questionnaire that asks them to rate how difficult it is for them to perform certain activities, their specific symptoms, and any physical limitations that they experience at work. Based on this questionnaire, individuals receive a score that determines their risk of developing hypertension. A higher score means a higher risk, while a lower score means a lower risk. These researchers found that each intervention experienced a decrease in DASH score after following the different interventions, which makes sense considering that the interventions both emphasize the DASH diet. Based on these scores, researchers concluded that while learning about proper nutrition habits can reduce hypertension risk by itself, one can also reduce the risk even further with access to technology like online shopping that automatically tailor to one's preferences.
Well, looks like I need to improve my nutritional habits and try some online grocery shopping. Andrew, where should I look for some reliable resources on nutrition?
Yeah, great question. There are so many different ways to access resources regarding nutrition. For starters, you can always consult your physician or a dietitian for the most accurate information. However, more accessible ways include websites backed by research for the public, such as the CDC. Additionally, the United States Department of Agriculture, or USDA, has a great resource at nutrition.gov, which has up-to-date topics on nutritional health and recipes to keep you as healthy as possible.
If you'd like to read about this article on online grocery shopping as a possible key to better nutrition habits by Kritika Dhamma, or read more of Kritika's articles, you can go to www.mso@ucla.org and check it out. In addition, stay tuned for more of Kritika's or Andrew's work. If you'd like to know more about the sources mentioned in this particular episode, you can locate them in the description box of this episode on Spotify or on our website. And that concludes this week's podcast. Thanks for tuning in with us, Morning Sign In, where we provide the latest scientific research and make research more accessible and easy to understand. Again, if you're curious about more of our work, make sure to check out our website at www.mso@ucla.org. Here, you'll find all of our past and recently published articles by our members, brief translations of some of these articles, our podcasts on other platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, and much, much more. Also, make sure to check out our Instagram at mso.ucla to stay updated. Playing now is Lo-Fi Beat by FAS Sounds, spelled FASSOUNDS. See you next week.